truly delighted to be here. And firstly, India's G20 presidency is being held at a point of time when India is taking over the presidency when there are several crises across the world. There's a crisis of geopolitics in Europe. There's a war which is going on for over a year, the Russia-Ukraine war. It has had huge implication in terms of food, fuel, fertilizer, and there's a challenge of moving fertilizer and food from Ukraine, which in terms implies that if you are not able to provide fertilizer, there will be a huge crisis of food. There's a crisis of war, there's a crisis of SDGs. Post-COVID era has seen 200 million people going below poverty line. About 100 million people have lost their jobs. So the 2030 SDG agenda, we are midway through that point, but instead of progressing, we have regressed. And therefore, when G20 leaders meet, one of the key challenges will be that how do you enhance sustainable development goals and what is the new package? And thirdly, there's a huge crisis of climate action, climate finance. And the Prime Minister has spelled out the Panchamrit, but what we need to do is to deliver on grounds. He spelled out his philosophy of life, that is lifestyle for sustainability. So life, climate action is one challenge. And fourthly, if climate action has to be implemented and SDGs have to be implemented, you need resources. And the developed world has not lived up to its commitment of providing $100 billion a year, which it had agreed to in 2009 at Copenhagen. So therefore, there's a challenge of providing the commitment which it has agreed to. And the principle of climate justice has been agreed to, so therefore it needs to provide those resources. But more than that, it's not just the countries, but you need multilateral institutions which are founded in the post-World War II era, post-Bretton Woods period. They need to be restructured, realigned. They have to be built for a new world where you need to finance for both sustainable development goals and climate finance. So you need institutions which instead of doing direct lending can do indirect lending using blended finance, credit enhancement, first loss guarantees. All these are critical. If you are able to do this, then you will do about 15x more lending than what is presently done. And then there is a huge challenge of, to our mind, there's a massive challenge of really driving growth in the world, because 1/3 of the world is in recession, and SDGs and climate goals will be met only if we are able to drive growth in an accelerated, inclusive, sustainable, resilient manner for a long period of time, which before the leaders of the world, that will be a challenge. And fourthly, I think one big challenge is that 75 countries of the world are facing a global debt crisis. So how do you provide, it's not just Chad, Zambia or Sri Lanka, 75 countries of the world. So if some of them start falling apart, the whole financial architecture of the world will fall apart. So global debt is a very big challenge. And these are some of the key challenges before the world. So as we move into G20 presidency, the priorities of India are actually driving inclusive, resilient, sustainable growth. It's about accelerating the pace of implementation of SDGs. It's about climate action and climate finance. It's about digital transformation and digital-led development, which India has demonstrated through its digital public goods. India is one of the few countries in the world which has built digital identity. It has built, linked digital identity to bank accounts. It has done digital fast payments. We do 11x payments of what Europe and USA do. We do 4x of what China does. So India has demonstrated that we have an alternative model as compared to the US big technology model. And that is based on railway tracks being owned by the government or the public sector, and on top of which the private sector innovates. So India is the only country where PhonePe competes with Google Pay, where WhatsApp competes with Paytm. There are 45 different apps operating. So India's model of development is very different from the big tech model of USA and from the GDPR model of Europe. Europe went for privacy but had to compromise on innovation. Whereas in India, we've driven both the data empowerment of the citizen as well as privacy and innovation a lot. And this is whether we did this in the case of COVID, where we have done 2.2 billion vaccination, whether we've done this in the case of identity. The challenge before the world is that there are 400 million people without an identity. There are over 200 million people without bank accounts. There are 133 countries without a fast payment mechanism. And how do you transfer this technology which India has built up to the rest of the world is one challenge. And then lastly, one of India's key priorities is women-led development. Because today there are more women than men in India. How do you push for financial inclusion? How do you push for better nutrition? How do you push for better job creation? How do you put women into leadership position is really the key to growth of the world. Because unless and until you are able to productively better utilize the power of women, it will be very difficult for the world to grow in due course. And that's a very major agenda of the government. So these are the broad priorities of India. We are doing the G20. We are going to host over 215 meetings in over 56 cities, and this will be a major challenge. We look forward into doing this in partnership with every single state and union territory. An event will be held in every single state and union territory of India. The objective is not to make it urban-centric like Delhi, but to expose visitors to all aspects and all parts of India. And that is what we will be doing. We are using this opportunity to do up these cities, to rejuvenate these cities. We are using this opportunity to sell India's brand. Every state can utilize this opportunity to build a brand for itself. We are using this opportunity to sell India's handloom, handicrafts, India's culture, all of this. And that is the big objective behind G20. I'll be very happy to respond to any queries that you may have. Unless you want me to talk a little bit on the budget.
Yeah, of course, please.
So I think, to my mind, this is a budget for a new India. This is a budget for a new India because it first pushes for consumption, which is critical because consumption will push demand. Demand in turn will push capacity utilization. Capacity utilization will push for more investments, and investments will put you on the virtuous cycle of growth. Why private sector investment is critical is that unless and until the animal spirits of the private sector are not revived, it will be very difficult for India to grow on a sustained basis over a long period of time. Between 2000 and 2010, India grew at high rates because the private sector investment was almost 25 to 30% of your GDP. And you need to drive that. And therefore, this huge number of direct tax benefits that have been given to the beneficiaries is a path-breaking initiative. The second key thing is that it focuses on CapEx. Now, capital expenditure is the best way to drive growth and create jobs. If you're going to put 2.4 lakh crores in railways, if your total expenditure is going to be 33% more than previous years, and 3 years in a row you drive this, that means you're building a new India, completely new India. New India of new railways, new tracks, new electrification of tracks, new trains, new roads, new expressways, new highways. So you're building in terms of infrastructure a completely new India. And the third thing is that despite providing these resources, the government has kept a very tight financial, discipline, because it has brought down the fiscal deficit from 6.4 to 5.9, and it has laid down a roadmap for 4.5 over a period of time, which means that it will enable more private sector investments to rise, because the government borrowing will reduce and the private borrowings will increase. And that will help you to bring in again private sector investment. The fourth key feature of this budget, to my mind, is that it's futuristic, it's very technology driven, it's digital technology led. It talks about 3 centers for artificial intelligence, it talks about new areas of growth, it looks at skilling for robotics, drones, AI, a whole range of new areas for skilling. And fifthly, I think the budget is remarkable because it's looking at the trajectory of green growth, which is very important. If India's future competitiveness is dependent on its going green, and I'm a long-term believer that it will be very difficult for India to grow unless and until it doesn't go green, because Europe will put in border taxes by 2026. It will not be possible to export, and without exports you can't grow. So you need to go green in a vast range of areas. Now, even if you do 100% electrification, you turn this into renewables. Instead of fossil fuel, you do 100% renewable. That's only 20% of your energy. The balance 80% is actually all hard to abate sectors, all sectors which are very difficult to abate, like refinery, like steel, like fertilizer, like long distance transport. This is 80% of your energy. You need to actually decarbonize these sectors. If you are able to decarbonize these sectors, this is the key. The challenge is that this area, all these areas, you can decarbonize only with green hydrogen. Now, green hydrogen, India is climatically blessed. No other country has the weather conditions, the climatic conditions like India has. India also has top class entrepreneurship. And many of our entrepreneurs, the big ones and some of these startups like Greenco and Renewable, etc., have demonstrated that we can push for renewables and we can bring down the cost of renewable very low. So actually, India is one country which was able to achieve its NDC targets 9 years ahead of schedule. Now the challenge is that to be able to achieve net zero, we need to accelerate green hydrogen. And India has the possibility of becoming the least cost producer of green hydrogen, the least cost producer of ammonia, the least cost producer for exports, the least cost producer for electrolyzer manufacturing. All this, there is a massive potential for India. And in the next 5 to 6 years, if we can become a champion of green hydrogen, it will be a very big transformation. And I think this is broadly my perspective, that this is a path-breaking budget. It's a transformative budget. It's a futuristic budget, and it's not a political budget. It's not a populist budget, but it's a transformative budget.
Thank you, sir. So next, we are opening a floor for questions. So the first question will be from our resident editor, Shahid.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so sir, this about G20. So you're working at a breakneck speed. You have a lot of working groups you have formed which are fine-tuning the agenda for the G20 summit in September. So I want to know, what is that one big idea that you plan to propose which will make people remember India's presidency? Could it be a code for the gig workers, and the gig economy is like growing very fast, especially after pandemic, and some believe that it will ultimately overtake the regular work. So what is that one idea like? Is there an idea like in that you plan to table and get everybody to agree on, and that India's presidency will be known for?
So we have 12 working groups. We have 8 tracks on the finance track. We have several engagement groups. We have a number of, each one of them is working around 3 to 4 priorities. It will not be appropriate to put one, but I've broadly given the priorities in terms of inclusive and resilient growth, in terms of a green, climate action and accelerating the pace of life, but which should, to my mind, lead towards a green development pact for all these countries, accelerating the pace of implementation of the SDGs, so a new action plan on SDG, and digital transformation and digital public goods, so, and women-led development. But I think 2 big ticket things would be pushing for green development and pushing for the digital public infrastructure, which India has built up in many countries of the South. So that is, technological innovations have till now come from the developed parts of the world. This is the first time that developing country like India, emerging market like India, will be able to showcase its technology.
So this is about the global south. India has always been the voice of global south. Even in the recent digital conference, also Prime Minister emphasized this. So how are we going to position India as a, what are the efforts, given the challenges faced by global south countries? So what are the efforts being taken by the government to, maybe bridge the divide, or, to increase the south sub-population?
So one of the key things is that Prime Minister recently held this interaction with 125 countries of the global south. A lot of ideas came in, a lot of experiences came in. And important thing is that there should be far more sharing of experiences of the developed world with the developing world, and we should learn from their experiences. What are their experiences which we can learn from, and our experiences which they can learn from. But one key thing is the challenge of global debt, which many of the global south countries are facing. And the challenge there is that, most lending, the debt issues are largely discussed in the Paris Club, which is basically driven by France. Then there is lending by IMF, there's lending by private sector, and there's also lending by China. So all of them need to sit together to be able to solve this, because if you can, IMF giving a package to Sri Lanka has very little meaning unless and until China is also not a party to it, because otherwise the IMF loan will go to settle China's debt. And China's debt has not been quoted, but has largely been non-transparent and opaque. And therefore, it's very important that all of them sit together, including China. Now, China has been objecting to this because China says that we'll settle our debt on a bilateral basis. But there's no such thing as bilateral. If you do that bilaterally, the debt package will still remain. And therefore, everybody needs to sit together and sort out these debt issues.
The next is Amit.
Yeah. Hello, sir. My question is more about one of the methods how we are going towards meeting our 2070 targets of net zero. You have been talking largely about electrification of mass transportation. So where you have been getting in buses, for cities and all. But at the same time, sir, there is a push for 2 and 4 wheelers as well. So do you think, it needs to be kind of worked out, because, it's again going to create some kind of a chaos unless and until, that decongestion of urban transport also you were talking about. So how do you see this going ahead, electrification of transportation in cities?
So firstly, India's urbanization has just begun. We'll do a lot of urbanization in the next 4 to 5 decades. We'll see 500 million people getting into urbanization. So our urbanization has to be very sustainable, and that urbanization should be based on cycling, walking. It should be based on public transportation. mass transportation, because that is the right mode. That means that would mean upfront money into infrastructure, transportation, and it's a very different model than what United States and Europe has built up. But at present in India, 75% of the vehicles are two-wheelers and three-wheelers. So you have to electrify them. All two-wheelers and three-wheelers should get converted into, by 2025, we should see that all of them can go electric. That means battery and battery storage will be the key. Long distance transportation, that is city to city movement, that should all go green hydrogen in due course. That it will be very difficult for electric buses to do long distance journey because of the heavy weight of the battery in buses. So that should be the green hydrogen route in the long run. So first is new forms of urbanization. Secondly, make your two-wheeler, three-wheeler and four-wheeler go electric. At least the two-wheeler, three-wheelers, India should have an ambitious target of converting all of them by 2025 into electric, and it's doable. And four-wheeler by push for them also. And electric buses should all go green hydrogen. That's my view.
Just a second part of it's a related question, sir. Again, in urbanization, you're talking about mass transportation, that's the area. But financing has always been a major issue, when you are looking at, because India would by 2030, if we are looking at to meet the targets, we would need at least 1 lakh electric buses in different cities. So where would that financing come from? Is there a feasible model that we are
No, financing is never a problem. There are a lot of resources available in the world. Even for climate action, there's a lot of resources available. It's a good structuring of projects. How do you de-risk projects? How do you ensure that municipalities or the transport undertakings which are buying the buses have the capacity to repay back? If they do not have the capacity to repay back, like discoms, it will become difficult. So if they are financially sound, you will be able to repay back. And therefore, de-risking projects of this nature as we accelerate is very important. It shouldn't be that some cities buy electric buses and don't pay them for a long period. That will impact the movement for electric buses.
Next, Yeshi, she covers MEA.
So, sir, we are having over 250 meetings. Now, the concern that most of the G20 members have is with Russia and its participation. As you would remember that in the G20 summit in Bali, President Putin couldn't come, and and Foreign Minister Lavrov had to go midway. So, how are you handling Russia and Russia's participation in G20? Also factoring in that Sergei Lavrov has said that he'll come for the foreign ministers meet in March. So is that like a tough call for you? And also a second question: what are you doing for security in your meeting in Srinagar? Because this is the first time that a meeting of this scale is going to happen there after a long gap. So if you could just.
So meetings will be held in every state of India.
Right.
Some of these meetings are engagement group meetings, and we expect the state to ensure full security for these meetings. That's not a challenge. We've already held about 12 meetings. We've not faced a challenge anywhere, but we'll ensure that there's security everywhere. We will invite everyone. It's a leaders summit of all top 20 leaders and 9 invited leaders. So we'll invite everybody. We are quite confident that everybody will come.
No, sir, but how will you handle, because a lot of the, especially European countries, are not very comfortable with with Russia's participation in the context of
our summit is in September.
Not just summit, sir, even the run-up. Like Lavrov is coming the next month for the foreign minister.
He was there for the leaders summit in Bali also.
Yes, but he had to leave early, sir, because
No, he didn't leave early. He left the next day after. He participated in the event. Even if he leaves 1 hour early, it doesn't matter. But all of them will come.
Have been talking about India's stake, digital public goods. So we have, say, something like CoWIN or UPI or even ONDC recently to showcase. So what is I just want to get a sense, what is the next big thing the government is working on?
So, this budget has also talked about digital public infrastructure and agriculture. So across every sector, we are trying to build this digital public infrastructure model. And the objective is that we should first evangelize, let the world know that this is very unique, this is very different from what the Western world has created. The Western world has created a big tech model. So all innovations have come from Google, Facebook, Microsoft, whereas, or Tencent, or Alibaba. Whereas what India has done is created an alternative model of public infrastructure on which private sector has competed and innovated. And we also empowered our citizens with data. That means we've done digital identity, we've done data empowerment, we've done fast payments, we've done COVID, all of this. Now, our first objective will be to evangelize, tell across working groups what is digital public infrastructure, that they are open source, open APIs, they are interoperable so that everybody benefits and more innovation takes place. That is what we've done. They are not closed models like the Western world model. And first objective will be to educate everybody. Secondly, in our view, this is an innovation which is the best model for the world to ensure privacy of data, also empower citizens with their data. So we will try and a new committee has been constituted with me and Nandan Nilekani as the chairperson. That will discuss and see how we can take this forward. And across all digital, all working groups, all tracks, everywhere.
And government will play the role of a facilitator and not that of a big daddy kind of a...
Government will only be a facilitator.
So I cover petroleum and telecom sector. So my question is, last year's war in Europe has highlighted the energy security challenges in the world. So how India is securing itself and what will be the agenda of G20?
No, so food, fuel and fertilizer. G20 is a grouping to discuss economic issues, growth issues. Food, fuel and fertilizer should be freely available to everyone. If you don't allow that, then everybody gets impacted, like Europe has got impacted because of high fuel prices. So food, fuel, fertilizer should be kept apart from everything. And India has been fortunately buying from Russia because it has a big population. India has a big population. We can't afford that we go into further poverty because of high energy prices. So we've been buying oil from Russia and we'll continue to do what's in our national interest.
My name is Jitin and I cover environment and agriculture. So my question is related to just transition effort by the south world, south of the globe, global south. So how India is going to pursue the rich nation to fund the just transition of the global south countries? And what is the strategy, how India is strategizing?
No, we will keep pursuing all countries. But let me also say that the principle of just transition has been accepted by all the developed world, and therefore India is not responsible for polluting the world. India has taken only 1.5% of the carbon space, whereas it is entitled to 18.5% of the carbon space. The pollution, 88% of the pollution is being done by the developed world of the total carbon space available. And therefore they need to ensure that there is climate justice and they are able to provide resources which they had agreed to in 2009. But let me also say that there is no shortage of resources in the world. There's a lot of institutional funds available, etc. There's a need to transform the multilateral institutions so that they are able to provide credit enhancement, blended finance, so that more resources can flow from private sector resources. A lot of resources available in the private sector which should then flow.
So sometimes it feels like that moving towards electrification can happen by 2025 for two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Just wanted to understand these things. Right now the penetration of two-wheelers is just 4 to 6%, and to move towards 100% in 2 years is a big target. So how is it doable?
थ्री व्हीलर्स तो हो गए करीब करीब सो आप देखिए टेक्नोलॉजी डिस्ट्रप्शन होगा आप देखिएगा कि there will be a very sharp movement towards electric vehicles. Everybody will go in for electric vehicles, two-wheelers in particular. Because the total cost of ownership of two-wheeler electric vehicles has come down very sharply.
Right now, but we are talking about removing FAME subsidy, so this will make two wheels very expensive by 50,000. And right now we don't have
FAME subsidy, to my mind, we should have another FAME scheme. By whatever name it is decided, we should have a FAME scheme to support the transition from two-wheelers, three-wheelers.
Health reporter Kavita will ask a question.
One of the agendas at the health meet at G20 is strengthening cooperation in pharmaceuticals. So recently WHO has issued twice basically on India-made drugs, which was called unadulterated. So how will it harm India's position, as it's called as the pharmacy of the world at the G20 meet, where we are talking about, providing quality, safe and affordable medicines?
I don't think so. One incident like this, which has not yet been fully confirmed, does not damage your reputation, but India has been able to provide medicines at the low costs across the world. And India is the pharmacy of the world. If it wasn't for India, medicines would have sold at very high prices. Number one. Number two, India is also the vaccine capital of the world. Number three, India has also demonstrated that it could do vaccination to such large size and scale through COVID. And fourthly, we are the only country which has been able to converge Ayurveda and yoga along with modern systems of medicine. We've also provided 500 million people insurance, health insurance, through Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So all these are major landmarks in the health journey of this nation.
You are a person of ideas actually, you have been a turnaround man. But there are lots of sensitivities involved when it comes to China, and you are saying that they'll be coming for all kind of meetings and things which are holding. How are you handling those sensitivities? Because lots of tension is involved around the borders right now, and which is gradually increasing also. Sir. Your words, sir.
No, there are sensitivities. We have a border challenge, but we'll continue to engage with China with diplomacy and dialogue. That is the way forward. We've unlike what has happened in Europe, we've continued to do diplomacy and dialogue, and we'll continue to do that.
You said what I found very interesting in the conversation that we had till now is the clarity that you bring to whatever you say, whether it is on electric vehicle, whether it's on G20, concept of G20 and how India is going to present and use that platform to put across our message and connect the world in a different way. What I found very interesting is what you said about the women participation, how that is very vital for India and for the world to go ahead and to grow. So we had for the first time a very interesting phenomena here in the sense that, the session was opened by the president of India, who was woman, and the budget was presented by the finance minister, who is also a woman. So that is in itself is quite significant. But having said that, we must also put some of our attention in the participation of women in the workforce. That has not, shown the kind of commitment, a kind of, push that the government is giving to women, the women force or women participation, empowerment through job creation or through participation in the development process. What do you have to say on that?
No, two things. What the Prime Minister aims at through this women-led development is a whole movement where you've seen in the budget also on women SDGs, 81 lakh women SDGs which will be supported. If you see the Jan Dhan, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan accounts, when we started the when we started the Jan Dhan Yojana, there were only 19% of the accounts were led by women. Today, 56% of those accounts are owned by women. 56%. We've added about 23 crore new accounts for women. And if you look at the Mudra accounts, almost 70% of the loans have gone to women. So we'll have to push for very conscious economic empowerment of women. I don't think that will happen if we do not push for conscious economic empowerment of women through various means. And some of those strategies we are examining in the context of G20. I will not like to speak on them. But economic empowerment, improving learning outcomes, improving health outcomes, improving the virtuous cycle of malnourishment from the time a woman gets pregnant, because the weak mother then produces children who are wasted and stunted. And it's very difficult to set that right unless we don't track the women from the date of a pregnancy till the point of a delivery with very great care and attention. And these are all very, very important things which the country must do and which the country is now focusing on in terms of tracking through technology.
Any
So
more?
one last question. You've been so active, from the time you were a bureaucrat to now G20 Sherpa. Do we see you coming into active politics anytime soon?
No, I have no intention. I have had my innings. I want to just read, write, and play some games. I have no intention of joining politics at all. My ambition is to do good intellectual work after this. After the G20 summit was over, I should get some time to travel, to read, write, and that is my real aim in life is to take over your job of being a journalist.
Yeah, you are welcome to if you are sensitive.
I
Now
plan-
or later, you are
Yeah.
welcome to write for
Yeah.
our paper, and a regular column or in
Yeah.
periodicity can be
Yeah.
discussed and decided. And we would love to read you, and you always bring a kind of clarity to whatever you are doing.
Thank you so much. So kind of you. So kind.
But one last question I would like to ask, because there is a lot of talk about the G20 infrastructure. You also said we are trying to revitalize our cities through this process. So what is the state of the infrastructure development?
I think we've got a lot of support from the states. Every city, every state is doing a lot of work. I saw Udaipur, Fatehpur Lake being cleaned, Fatehpur, all the entire city being cleaned, Mumbai being cleaned, Pune being cleaned, Aurangabad being cleaned. Kerala, they have been making a new convention center for the Sherpa meeting in the backs of Kerala. So, a lot of good transformational work is going on. Every state is cooperating with us. We are working in partnership with every state.
And how about Delhi?
Delhi also, the LG and his team and everyone is working as a team. You will see a good face of New Delhi by the time we have the foreign ministers meeting here.
So what is your assessment of the PLI schemes in view of current scenario when the whole world is going through slowdown?
No, production-linked incentive scheme is a very important scheme to get size and scale of manufacturing. It's a scheme where you have to keep growing in size and scale year after year, year after year, year after year, year after year for 5 years. But PLI is meant for a limited period of 5 years. That's not the solution for India. The solution for India is what is being attempted by the Prime Minister. Make India easy, simple, scrap rules, regulations, procedures. Make India a productively competitive and an efficient economy. Your cost of production you should be the least cost producer in India. We've made India a country with rules, regulations and procedures over the last 70 years. You have to scrap a lot of them. That process is on. If you don't do this, you'll never be able to, your infrastructure turnaround has to be better. Your turnaround at ports has to be better. Your labor laws have to improve. All these are very critical things. You should benchmark yourself with some of the best competitive economies of the world. India, PLI is not a long-term solution. Let us understand that. Our solution lies in India becoming a very productively competitive and efficient economy in the world.
So, will we see China Plus One theme in the summit, given China is also part of the summit?
China plus 19, not China plus 1. There are 20 countries and there are 9 invited countries. And 19 plus 1 means not China plus 19, it means 19 plus Europe, which makes it 43 countries actually. China plus 1 is only when you look at it from the viewpoint of investment by the European countries.
Sir, you have already spoken about what I wanted to ask you about this digitization and green initiative. So, would you like to add more to it? And is India is really
what India has done through digital public goods is a remarkable story. You know, we built identity, we built bank accounts. 2015 to 2018, 55% of the bank accounts across the world were made in India, made in India, and every second bank account opened in the world was in India. Then we linked them up with Aadhaar, we linked them up with mobile numbers, we could then do transactions. I've not used my debit credit card for 4 years now. I've not been to an ATM machine, I've not used my checkbook for 4 years. मैं लोग सारा पेमेंट सब चीज अपने मोबाइल से खरीदता हूँ तो I mean that's what tier 2 tier 3 cities people in rural areas are doing using QR codes today. Oh, India's phenomenal. You know, we are Indians, we don't realize it, but what India has achieved is path breaking. People do not realize what we have done. We are doing 11x fast payments compared to Europe and America put together. हम लोग अपने आप को क्रिटिसाइज करते रहते हैं.
And is India is really equipped to take up this green initiatives and all?
Yeah, no other country is better equipped than India is because of climatic conditions, because of top-class entrepreneurship, and because of very good startups. But we need long-term lending. Long-term lending of 30 years is the key, and that is what multilateral financial institutions should provide.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.